Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 556. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility through this podcast since 2005. Today, we're talking with Kate Eckman about her new book, The Full Spirit Workout. You're going to learn about spiritual fitness, ways to stretch your comfort zone, how to build strong emotional muscles, what a VIA strength is, and how you can take your own free assessment, and more. I think you're going to really enjoy today's episode. Now, before we dive in, a few reminders. Please hit subscribe in your favorite podcast app, such as Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Amazon. And if you'd be willing to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, would be so grateful. And there is a link in the show notes on how to do that. You'll find it at kimberlywilson.com/podcast, and you'll find the show notes for this episode at kimberlywilson.com/556. If you are new to Tranquility du Jour, a big welcome, and there is a link to learn more. Also, a few things coming up. We've got the TDJ Live Masterclass, which is the last one of the year, happening on Sunday, September 19th. And then also my last virtual retreat of the year is our fall adventure, and that's happening on October 2nd. And finally, if you would like to be part of everything that will be going on in 2022 through Tranquility du Jour, there is a link to join the waitlist for the TDJ Passholder Collective. Would love to have you with us. Now, without further ado, Kate Eckman is the author of The Full Spirit Workout and a Columbia University certified executive leadership coach. She leverages her experience as a well-known communications, performance, and mindfulness expert, accomplished entrepreneur, and elite athlete to equip leaders with the tools, methodology, and energetic boost they need to excel. Kate's work is rooted in neuroscience, positive psychology, and a whole person coaching techniques. Passionate about mindfulness practices for both brain and body health, she's a meditation teacher and course creator for Insight Timer, the world's #1 ranked free meditation app. You can visit her at kateeckman.tv. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to be here.
Well, congrats on this gorgeous book, The Full Spirit Workout, a 10-step system to shed your self-doubt, strengthen your spiritual core, and create a fun and fulfilling life. No big deal, right?
It's so exciting to see. I guess it's how moms feel about finally giving birth and being able to share their child with the world rather than just their belly. So it is fun after kind of a very isolating process, writing and editing the book, to be able to share these tools and techniques and strategies and fun exercises with everyone.
Well, and they're so great and they're so tangible. And so listeners, we'll be talking through quite a few of these. But I'm curious, how did you kind of pull all this kind of this 10-step system together?
Yeah. So, I was a competitive swimmer for 17 years, and I knew how hard I had to train my physical muscles to compete at a high level for so long. And so I thought there must be a way to train my attitudinal muscles, my mental, emotional, spiritual muscles. And after going through the loss of 2 loved ones to suicide in 1 year and really coming to terms with not only their deaths, but also the way that I was choosing to live my life, who like most of us, places all of our worth in the externals, what we look like, how much money we make, how many jobs we're booking, how many people we're impressing, the social media following. It's kind of an unsustainable, exhausting, insatiable hunger that we can never fully, cure or fully tame. It's like taming a beast. And so I knew my life depended on coming up with some tools and keys for a better way of living. And I wanted to share them with the world. And this was, the process of not just personal stories and life lessons from experiences, but also going back to school and studying whole person coaching techniques at Columbia, along with neuroscience and positive psychology and deep diving into so many different spiritual principles and themes and practices. And I was and still am very, very committed to this work, because what is the alternative? And I've been in some dark places and I'm not willing to go back there. And I look around and see so many people stuck in their lives or unfulfilled or unhappy or just like zombies going through the motions. And I'm just reminded that we're meant to be happy and we're meant to be actualizing our full potential, not just for ourselves, but for the upliftment of the world. So these are the conversations I like to have. I want to make spiritual fitness more mainstream and something that people talk about and are as familiar with as they are with physical exercise.
Well, I love that, because that leads me to my next question. Like, tell us about spiritual fitness, right? I mean, and I love this because it's like, okay, well, I can do these great steps to, be a great swimmer or, what have you. But it's like, okay, if I don't have the attitude to go along with this, then what? Right? So tell us about spiritual fitness.
Yeah, I think spiritual fitness really is the courage to be who we truly are, not just that polished, put together person that we present to the world, but that messy person behind the scenes, just trying to keep it all together. As I say to my clients, this is a no pretend zone. I think we all are guilty of pretending, or especially social media. It sets us up for failure in that you put out your highlight reel, pretend to be the perfect mother who has it all together. And as women, we need to be doing all the things and looking really good while doing it. I mean, even today, logging on with you, I felt the need to apologize for not looking that cute. It's just, why do we do that? Or it's just like, you actually look great. This is no video. And I think, oh, well, I'm not all done up. But I think that's a symptom of our society, that as women, you've really got to have it all going on and you better look good while you're doing it. Right. And so I think it's letting ourselves off the hook and really it's allowing ourselves to be as we authentically need to be. But the first step in that is that you have to have some self-awareness and spend some time getting to the core and the root of who you really are. It sounds so simple, but it's not easy, because a lot of people, they have no idea who they are underneath all the titles and labels and perceived flaws or limitations.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a good reminder and so important, right? To keep in mind this idea of like, okay, we're not our highlight reels. We're messy, we're human. And how do we, because I love what you just said about self-awareness, how do we tap more into that sense of self-awareness? Because as you say, it sounds easy, right? But yet, how many of us really are aware? I mean, it can be as basic as like, what do you really like doing? It can be like, I don't know. I just know what I have to do, right?
Yeah. And we aren't sitting quietly in a room by ourselves often enough. I know that concept alone sounds horrifying and terrible to so many people, because we're used to bombarding ourselves with distractions and chaos and phones and devices and things to distract ourselves or numb ourselves. But when we spend that time, I call it my sit and stare time, where I sit for minimum 5 minutes a day, stare out the window or straight ahead and check in with myself like I would a small child and ask, how are you doing? What do you need right now? What can I do for you? What's working? What isn't? And even taking a courageous step and saying, good job today, or I'm so proud of you for not losing your cool with that really upsetting email, or, refraining from telling that rude person that they're rude because it could damage the relationship forever. This is spiritual fitness and practice. It is that non-reactivity. It is taking that pause before we fly off the handle and really think about what we really want, not what we want, but what we really want. And that takes the time and space to get clear and listen to that divine wisdom that's always available to us. We just have to download it. I'm not talking about the ego mind who says, you're not cute enough, you're not smart enough, you're not as good as Sally on Instagram, you're not as good as Johnny next door. What's wrong with you? Why'd you say the dumb thing? No, I'm talking about that divine wisdom, which is the actual truth, which reminds us how powerful we are and that we can do whatever we decide is important enough. We just have to give ourselves that time and space. Again, simple, but not always easy in this hustle, fake it till you make it, grind, no days off culture that is so gross, quite frankly. And we all need to consciously unsubscribe from.
So, one of the things I wanted to ask about too, that I think really ties into all of this is okay, once we do have this sense of self awareness, I love the idea too of just pausing 5 minutes a day. We can all do that. One way to do it too, that's really lovely, is in the bath. Right. Because it's like, okay, you're already soaking in the tub. Why not just be like, okay, this is my mindfulness time too. But how do you encourage people to, once they do have that sense of self-awareness, to then kind of start stretching themselves and pushing the comfort zone a bit?
Yeah. And thank you, first of all, for bringing up the bath, because I take one every night with my bubbles and my salts. And it really is a purification ritual. And we all know we have to take a bath or take a shower to really cleanse ourselves of the dirt and the germs and the sweat from the day. And so the same is true in this sit and stare time or meditation or your mindfulness time, however you want to label it. We're cleansing our minds of the emotional gravity, the stress, the fear, the rude comment, the comparison, the judgment. We have to cleanse our minds the same way we cleanse our bodies. So I love that you brought that up. And so while you are in the bath or shower, think about that cleansing ritual for your mind as well, and really taking a moment to clear away all of that noise and clutter and dirt and grime. That's a really good way of thinking of it. But in terms of stretching our comfort zone, this is something that a lot of people struggle with, because I get it. The comfort zone, it's comfy. We like it. It feels good. It feels safe. But when we stretch outside our comfort zones, we become the men and women who are actually capable of achieving our cherished goals, because we expand and grow and transform ourselves. We become the people who naturally attract the experiences and opportunities and relationships, the wealth, rather than trying to force or control or strive to make anything happen. And so this is where life gets really juicy. We see what we're made out of. We build our confidence, because that imposter syndrome that so many people battle with takes several seats when it says, well, who are you to do that? And it's like, well, I'm doing it. It's like, well, who are you to quit your job and move to California? And it's like, well, I just quit my job and moved to California. So you silence the inner critic, you silence the imposter, and you're able to actually be that person. So take a leap of faith. I find when I do it, I'm co-creating with the universe. It steps in to assist me and help me, whether it's in the form of meeting awesome people like yourself to be with me on my journey. As Martin Luther King Jr. says, on your journey, mighty companions will join you. So maybe your comfort zone is also releasing or letting go of some relationships that aren't really lighting you up anymore. And I think we've all experienced that, whether it's a relative or someone we've known 20 years, but we think, gosh, this person doesn't really see me or support me or love me, and being okay with letting that person fall away temporarily or permanently, and making space for the people who can help you stretch your comfort zone and actually achieve your goals, because they believe in you and they're also doing the work and putting themselves out there in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that's a really great point too. As you say, it's like, okay, to make space for those who are also putting themselves out there, right? Because it's, it's that whole thing with Brene Brown where she talks about being in the arena, right? Like, don't criticize me unless you're also in the arena, meaning doing, putting yourself out there, right? Because it's easy, to criticize others when you don't see what goes into it, right? And so that's a great reminder of that's too who we want to surround ourselves with, people who are also putting themselves in the arena, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of a painful discovery when you think, gosh, this person, I know they love me or they claim to love me, and they aren't willing or able to really see or hear or acknowledge me. And I think that's an epidemic in our culture. And what it just says to me is, I want everyone to feel seen and heard and acknowledged in my presence. That's my mission. That's a job title that will never be on my resume, because I know the pain of not feeling seen, whether it's a parent or a sibling or a friend or a college roommate. And you think, gosh, what is that about? And I never want anyone to experience that pain. And that's even the mission behind this book, of being in a dark place and not having the tools. And so making it my life mission to come up with these tools that are fun, because it's even in the subtitle. And I know myself, I don't want to do things that feel daunting and that I don't enjoy doing. And so just making this a way of life. And I promise you that when you are staying true to yourself and being as you authentically need to be, you will absolutely attract everything you need on your journey to help you get there. So that's part of the co-creation and the reward of stretching your comfort zone.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, this kind of ties in too with my next question of like, okay, how do we unlearn the lies and mistaken beliefs that have taken root in our subconscious? And I think sometimes, we're not even aware that it's there, but we're like, oh, I could never do that. Right. Right. And then you're like, okay, well, why not?
Yeah, I think it's first acknowledging that we have this limiting belief, whether it's what do I hear a lot? I don't have time. I'm too busy. These are excuses too. You have to have a job to get a job. You have to look a certain way to be in a relationship. It's where do these beliefs even come from? So for me, I had to go back to origin stories. All of our origin stories are from childhood. A caretaker or someone, a teacher says something that isn't true, that isn't based in facts that we make true. Then we go about our lives collecting evidence for why that lie is true. And we wonder why we feel so crappy and have these issues that we need to sort out. So first being willing to go back and think, where did that belief come from? In my case, it was the little 4-year-old at the swim club who overheard the swim instructor telling my mom that he didn't think I was a very good swimmer. And the mindset that I created was, oh my gosh, I have to perform at a really high level so that I'm safe in the world and my mom and dad will love me and be proud of me and I can impress strangers. I guess that matters. So they don't talk crap about me behind my back to someone I love. And having to go back and be like, okay, that's not even true. Someone's opinion of me is not the truth. It doesn't matter. My thoughts and feelings about me are the only ones that truly matter, and really owning and embracing that. And then again, co-creating a new thought system, a new story, a new mantra for ourselves, taking the compliments that we get, making that truth, collecting evidence for that. How often do we dismiss the nice compliment? So many people can't even accept a compliment, but then that one, criticism or that one snide remark or that one hateful comment, we make paramount truth. So I think really cleaning this up, but first we have to acknowledge and be aware that we're doing it, and then be willing to release that, delete it like you would the corrupt file on the computer, come up with this new thought system. And it is a practice like physical exercise, and you have to keep trying this on for size until this thought system becomes your default setting rather than the lie.
Right. All based in neuroscience, right? This idea of you can change your brain, right? But you have to carve these new neural pathways. And this origin story is pretty deeply carved, right? So we have to do a lot of work to carve a new pathway. So I love that you also have, some background in positive psychology. I did a certificate program in applied positive psychology. Very, very good work. And then, of course, the neuroscience, like with the mindfulness and the beauty and the fact that we can actually make these changes. But it is a lot of work because we have to unravel, right?
Yeah. And I think another way to get there, there's researchers that I talk about in my book who talk about the curious brain versus the anxious brain. And unfortunately, most of us spend most of our time in the anxious brain. If we can just be aware when we're doing it, the anxious brain says something like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to pass this test. I didn't prepare enough. I'm not smart enough. Oh my gosh, I'm going to fail. Anxious brain. The curious brain says, I wonder how many questions I can get right on this exam. I wonder, how fun it will be to connect with my colleagues and talk about neuroscience. Again, I'm making stuff up, but anytime that we can move from the stress hormone cortisol that's associated with the anxious brain and really move into the endorphins of the curious brain, think of yourself as a child and just how curious and playful you are. Getting back to that place. So when you're in that stuck place, when you're swimming in anxiety, notice it. Take an adult time out, sit your butt down as I do, do your sit and stare time or your meditation time, check in with yourself, and also get curious. Or, I'm really spinning out right now. What's going on? Oh, I'm triggered because my values are being threatened. Okay. I don't have to be upset at this person. I'm just really triggered because they're violating a value that I hold dear. So then you get control of the situation rather than the situation controlling you. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I was going to ask about this curious brain mode because I love that, right? It's this idea of like, rather than being like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way, or this email should not have upset me. It's like, okay, let's look at this. Let's just look at it. Bird's eye view. Like, okay, get curious. What is it about it that's stirring something up for me?
Yeah. And that's, again, a lot of people I think avoid this because it can be painful. I remember one time being at this group and it was actually in grad school, and on break, I found myself getting very emotional and even, crying a little bit. And I just, I was in the middle of a coaching, coaching degree and program. And so I thought, I got curious about my tears and just checked in with myself again, like if my child was crying, and I said, what's up? Like, what are these tears about? And I said, to myself, I'm really going to miss these people. These are really deep, meaningful, rich connections. And I think I'm sad that I'm not going to be interacting with these people on a daily basis anymore. And so then I identified what was going on, and I thought, and then, come up with an action strategy for yourself. And I thought, okay, well, I can keep in touch with them. We can set up a WhatsApp group, which we did. Many of us are based in New York. We can go out to dinner. And so I think but also there's nothing wrong with crying, or I'm crying because these connections mean a lot to me. So it's appropriate that I'm sad. And I speak openly in the book about that too, this notion that if we're feeling something besides a positive emotion, that's bad, or there's something wrong with us. And we've got to do away with that whole, toxic positivity culture. Sometimes it's appropriate that you're sad, that you're angry, that you're out of sorts, and really being okay with that, and allowing yourself to feel the emotion. Emotions pass through our body. I think the research says 90 seconds or something like that. And anything you feel after that is you creating a story about that emotion, or judging yourself for feeling a certain way.
Isn't that amazing? 90 freaking seconds, right?
Okay, so I'm like, isn't it 90 correct. Seconds? I love that. Yes. You know that. Isn't that unbelievable when you think I've sat in anger for hours before?
Days.
People sit in anger for years.
Lifetimes, yeah. Right?
Yeah. When it's really 90 seconds. And then the stories that we create, that's another thing I've learned about the brain and my research is that the brain is lazy and it doesn't like gaps. So if there's a gap, it goes to fill in right away. Like, oh, Kimberly looked at me funny. That means she doesn't like me. And it's because I live in New York City. Oh my gosh, I better move so that I can please Kimberly and that we can get along. I mean, that sounds absurd. And yet we do stuff like that all the time, where you're just like, girl, I was just taking a drink of water. I think you're amazing. And I love New York. I'll be there for ballet class next week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then we can get so worked up because we know this story is true, and yet it has nothing to do with reality. It's so fascinating. And that's why I love what you just said, and a reminder of just like to check in, right? And to be like, okay, the story I'm telling myself about the fact that she just had a sip of water and rolled her eyes means what, right? And it's like, do I know that to be absolutely true beyond a reasonable doubt? And it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah. And I think then if we even have a thought like that, it's, am I just projecting that onto you, for instance, or, what in me feels insecure? What in me is worried that people won't like me? So really cleaning up what's going on with us, because as I talk and write very openly about too, it's, I wrote an article and it's in the book about not everyone will like you. And that's okay, because 99% of it has absolutely nothing to do with us anyway. And I know it's painful because you think, gosh, I was so nice, or someone might not like what we look like, or our work, or whatever it is, but it's really just their own reality or projection of what they're going through. And quite frankly, if someone is spewing any negativity towards you, it is about them and not you, unless you're violating someone or doing something, to cause harm. And I think just the more that we can consciously be aware of these things, but that's why, I wanted to do these practices, because they're themes that everyone struggles with, regardless of where you live, how successful you are, what you're going through. They're common themes, and it's part of the human condition. And rather than being mad or beating ourselves up or judging, blaming, condemning others, it really is about giving ourselves the space to kind of work through these things. So again, we're changing our default setting. It is like changing your DNA. So you don't have to try so hard anymore. You just naturally become a person who is unbothered by this nonsense. And, unfortunately, the chaos and uncertainty and sickness in our society isn't going anywhere. So now is the time really to acknowledge and accept and embrace the fact that our confidence, our resilience, our optimism, it's an inside job. It's something that we can all work on, though, for free. Doesn't cost a penny. We just have to be willing to put in the work.
Right, right. And it is work, right? To unlearn patterns and to create new neural pathways and to question our stories and to get curious, but really good benefit. So let's talk about the 5 Ps.
Okay, I love the 5 Ps. This was part of my research project that I did at Columbia, where I studied and asked a lot of research participants about leveraging confidence to accelerate leadership development, because I was seeing the effect of bad leadership all around me and the effects, the detriment that it could cause. And so the 5 Ps are presence, patience, purpose, preparation, and practice. Because I love you and your audience, I'll give you 2 bonus Ps, and that is pause and person, as in be a person. And I know we don't have time to really flesh all of them out. And so I'll go to patience, because I think that's a universal concept that people struggle with. And the word patience stems from the Latin word for suffering. So no wonder we have a hard time with patience, because we're suffering while we wait for the thing that we want. But 20 years ago, I heard a Grammy acceptance speech that I'll never forget. It's the only one I ever remember. And country singer Shelby Lynn won Best New Artist. And when she accepted her award, she said, "It only took me 13 years and 6 albums to get here." And I'll never forget that, because she was a little snarky about it and even said, for me, it's always been all about the music, meaning she didn't feel the need to get into some gimmick or dress a certain way or whatever. She just was really committed to her authentic music. And eventually it paid off, but it wasn't an overnight thing. And so it's a reminder for us to keep going, keep putting one foot in front of the other, believe in the divine timing, trust in yourself and in the process. And even patience explains how and why I'm alive. My mother couldn't get pregnant for nearly 8 years. And obviously she did, because I'm her biological child and I have an older brother. But I said, "So what happened? How did you finally get pregnant?" And she said, "I gave up." And she didn't mean she quit trying or threw in the towel, but she's a woman of faith. She said, "I gave it up to a higher power." And I think that took the stress and pressure off of her body. And she got pregnant with my brother a month later, and we're just a year and a half apart. So I invite everyone to give it up. I think saying to people, let it go, is a bit dismissive and even abusive. And so I say, I give it up to a higher power, whatever you believe in. I believe in God, which is universal love, and surrender and lean into that trust muscle. It is a muscle that we can develop, and it really takes the pressure off it. And then just quickly with person, be a person. My speaking coach, Eduardo, always says this to me, because I'm a perfectionist, a recovering perfectionist. I'm obsessed with performance. And he's like, just be a freaking person. And our humanity, our authenticity is lovable and relatable. So if all else fails, just be a freaking person. And people will really relate to that.
I think people really appreciate that, right? To understand, like, oh, life is not Instagram, right?
Yeah, or this performance where we need to, I really always thought I had to deliver this perfect performance. And what does that even mean? And no such thing, but people don't relate to a perfect performance. People relate to your humanity, and people relate to you being a person. And that's something that I'm learning to embrace more. And life just feels a lot more enjoyable. And then as it would turn out, I quote unquote perform a whole heck of a lot better when I'm just being a person.
And one of the things you just mentioned, which actually was a question I wanted to ask, is about kind of building those emotional muscles, right? Because, to a degree, they do. They atrophy like real muscles do, without being worked out. And so how do you encourage us from a spiritual fitness perspective to really exercise and connect with and grow and build our emotional muscles?
Yeah, as I like to say, when you see the anger train coming, don't get on board. And this really is about the non-reactivity and taking a pause, and also not just letting ourselves off the hook, but letting other people off the hook, and developing a bit more of of self-sufficiency and really taking the high road and exercising your forgiveness muscle. I do exercises in the book called foam rolling for forgiveness. I bring in the physical language that you would do at a gym. And really, I think sometimes I had this mentor who said to me when I was, in a place of anger or my emotional muscles were getting a bit flabby, she would say to me, who have you not forgiven? And sometimes it's forgiving ourselves. I think that we underestimate how much stress brings us down and makes our mental and emotional muscles so flabby and so out of shape. And we hold on to so many things that aren't even ours to carry. And we are so righteous and self-righteous in our unforgiveness. And, when I was studying spirituality and reading A Course in Miracles, it was that whole notion of, it's easy to love people who are loving. It's easy to like people who are telling us what we want to hear. But the challenge really is to love people who aren't being loving, and to accept people who are unkind. Not that you need to have lunch with them or be their friend, but really when these things come up, for me, it's family. No one triggers us like family, romantic partner. These are lifetime assignments. It doesn't always mean we like these people, but wow, are they a great opportunity to build strong mental and emotional muscles because we're triggered by them. And there is that amount of love where, we treat the people we love the worst sometimes. So I saw a quote recently that made me laugh out loud, and it said, "You think you're so enlightened, go spend a week with your parents." And I just thought that was hysterical and very relatable. I love my parents. I have a good relationship with my parents, and I'm very triggered by them. So what a great practice to exercise these inner muscles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Family, around the holidays as a therapist, around the holidays, it's really, people get a bit anxious about going home and being with family. And I just always this is the perfect lab for you to practice all the skills we've been working on, right? You get so much opportunity.
Oh my gosh, but we're so resistant to it because I'm like, well, I just want to hang out with my best friend who loves me and adores me and tells me nice things about myself and sees me and hears me. And those people are so important. But and this is something that I continue to work through. I think there's this notion too, that if you're the therapist, if you're the coach, if you write the book, you look a certain way, you make a certain amount of money, you're good. You don't have to do the work. And you know that better than anyone. This is a lifetime, work, just like physical exercise. If you want to have optimal health and live a strong, healthy, happy life, you have to exercise your physical muscles. And the same is true with our inner muscles, but the rewards are so worth it. And when you start to see your confidence boosted, when you start to see your relationships improve, when you start to attract these opportunities and experiences and wealth that you would have only dreamed about a few years ago, you think, oh gosh, this stuff works, but it only works if you do. Just like physical exercise, you can't just show up at the gym in your cute outfit. You actually have to sweat, and your personal trainer can't do your push-ups for you, right?
Right. Well, and, speaking of emotional muscles, also, what about working out your brain, right? So from this neuroscience perspective, and, so this next question is how can we work out our brain to reduce emotional pain and increase our overall well-being?
Yeah, I think this is really getting conscious about what brings you joy. And I even, I did research around this and asked people, and not one person talked about a material item. No one said their car brought them joy. No one said their house brought them joy. And we like our cars and homes, right? We need a place to live and, drive for most of us, unless you live in New York City. But I think it's the little things. I think that's the good news too, is, one woman talked about watching her 2-year-old watch the bees doing their jobs and seeing the awe and wonder in his eyes. And so this is boosting our endorphins just by focusing on the things that bring us joy. A quick way to do this is right now, think of who or what brings you joy. Whatever came to mind is perfect. For me, it's my parents' mini golden doodle Teddy, who's just pure love and joy. When I think of Teddy, I think of Teddy every day, and it brings me so much joy. I think of places I've been in the world. It's always in nature, just sitting in the mountains, being in the snow, going on a nature hike. Again, these things are free and brings me so much peace and calm and joy. And then allowing yourself to do these things more often, be with the animals more often, be in nature more often, and experience that awe and wonder. It's boosting your mental metabolism. It's giving your endorphins a boost. And I think we forget, or we think we need to make millions of dollars, or we need all these shiny objects to make us happy. And what research indicates is that it doesn't move the needle on our well-being. What moves the needle are acts of kindness and service, time affluence, social connection, sleep, and exercise. And my personal favorite, the gratitude visits that you can read about in the book, and how transforming it is. So the good news is we have so many tools for free at our fingertips. It's just a matter of learning how to access them and then making it a daily practice.
Yeah, great reminders. And I definitely, first thing that came to mind was my dog, right? Or one of my dogs, right? So it's just one of those things where you just visualize like this, like being, or this experience, right? You know, like being on the beach or whatever it is that just brings you a sense of joy, and just that great reminder to stay kind of connected to that. I love that, as the idea of working out your brain. And also another thing that comes to mind to me as I think about that is like being a lifelong learner, right? I mean, that's one way to definitely exercise that poor little brain, you know, that can get so lethargic.
Yeah. And I think really identifying and leveraging your strengths. There's a great assessment tool called Values in Action, the VIA character strengths. You can go online, just Google it. And it's so cool because you answer a series of questions. It lists your strengths. There's 24. And then for me, like you said, you reminded me, because my third one is love of learning. And so when I feel I want to contribute more, or really, leverage a strength, or get unstuck, I take another course. I get another certification. I learn a new language, or I travel and learn something new. And so I encourage you to go and discover your strengths, and then also work on the ones that are at the bottom of the list, whatever that is. Humor is another one of my strengths. So bringing humor to engagements and not taking myself so seriously. And I think it's a really fun tool, and people that I work with, they get a lot out of it, because you do learn more about yourself. And when you start learning more about yourself, you just feel better, and you're able to solve problems more on your own, rather than, calling someone and freaking out. You do become more self-sufficient and really get a handle on your emotions.
So what's your first one? Mine's appreciation of beauty.
I love that this assessment. It makes me so happy. My first one is love.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that yours is appreciation of beauty. So that's so great. So for people listening, let's say you're having a bad day, and you know this, but you're like, you know what, I'm going to go, there's a rose field down the street. I'm going to go walk amongst the roses, smell them, appreciate their beauty. It's going to automatically it literally changes your brain and changes your emotional state. And so for me, love, I'll love myself more. For me, I like to reach out to a friend and just say, hey, how you doing? Or go love on, there's horses, near my country home. So like go love on the horses. Or there's so many ways to extend love. There's so many ways to appreciate beauty, and again, be curious and get creative with it. And then you can incorporate this back into your workday, and then, share this assessment with someone else, and have an accountability or spiritual running buddy, as I like to call it, and start having these types of conversations with your friends, rather than venting or complaining about what isn't working. You start focusing on what is working and what you are good at, rather than where you're lacking.
Absolutely. And listeners, I'll put a link to this assessment in the show notes. It's so great. And I'll be curious what your number one is. And my last question for you, Kate, is, okay, the name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour.
Which I love. I've been so excited. This has been in my calendar, and I'm just so excited because the show alone, and then you're so lovely. But my favorite show name. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, and so I'd love to ask my guests, like, how do you find tranquility in your every day? Like, as you said, Rosefield, I was like, yes, I want to go to the Rosefield, so it's like, what is it for you that brings you tranquility in kind of like busy, bustling New York City daily life?
Yeah, I think it's my morning ritual. I like simple rituals. For me, it's my cup of espresso, and those 10 to 30 minutes. I'd rather get up earlier to have that time to not rush into the day, but to wake up and literally smell my espresso and think about where the beans came from to even make this, and to think about what region of the world that it came from, and to really savor. That's another spiritual vitamin I talk about in my book. But I think the practice of savoring during a ritual is so therapeutic, and it just starts my day off in this calm, centered, grounded way. And I kind of know what to expect. It gets me out of bed in the morning. I'm like, oh, I'm tired, but I'm like, oh, it's not just the espresso, but it is that ritual. And I think just those 10 to 30 minutes, like I said, quiet time with myself to sit and reflect, set an intention for the day, give thanks and praise that I'm awake to see another day, and really think about. For me, I always do ask how I can be of service each day in whatever way. And that makes me very other focused. And so again, it takes all of that pressure and stress off of like me, and what I have to do. Thinking about how we can uplift and energize others, I think is so important.
Absolutely. Well, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute treat.
This was so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Over in the show notes, again, KimberlyWilson.com/556, you'll find a link to Kate's book, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn, along with the VIA assessment survey that I mentioned. So finally, you'll find ways to stay connected to Tranquility du Jour in the show notes, link to my 6 books and planner, ways to find me on social, a link to TDJ, my clothing line, and more. So thank you as always for tuning in. I hope you are as inspired as I was by this podcast interview, and I wish you a wonderful week ahead.